Hey everybody, how's it going? Steve here with another Game Explained discussion. I'm joined today by the specialist guest, my own boss, André Seegers. You've heard a lot of my opinions of The Last of Us Part 2 here on the channel in recent days, but what you didn't know is that he's actually been playing the game alongside me, but he was just a little bit behind and didn't finish it until recently. So I'm here to talk about his opinions about the game with him and see how we differ, what his differences in opinion are versus my own. Andre, how's it going?
It's going good, Steve. Thanks. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I was up pretty late finishing the game. It's up to like 11 p.m. finishing it. So I guess we should mention real quick, we're going to try and avoid any major spoilers in this, right?
Yeah, we're still going to try to avoid major spoilers. If you do want a spoiler-filled discussion, we do have one coming in a few days featuring Kat from US Gamer and Greg Miller from Kinda Funny, so do keep it on the channel to check that out. But this will be a more light discussion in nature. First off, Andre, let's just go with your overall impressions. What did you think of The Last of Us Part 2? And sorry, before we continue, I should mention that Sony did provide both of us with review copies for this game, so that's how he already has the game completed.
Right. Can't forget that disclaimer. That's right. So overall, like, it's good. I had a good time with it. The combat is probably some of the most thrilling and tense I can remember in a game. So in a gameplay sense, I had a really good time. I think it's a great evolution of what Last of Us did. It removes some of the more tedious elements. There's no more pushing characters around in the water on a crate or whatever they did ad nauseum in the first game. Very few, like helping people up a ledge, for instance. It's still there, but it's not as obnoxious as it was before. So yeah, the gameplay, top level stuff. I think they found a perfect middle ground between stealth and action, like stealth action. It's so good. Both work so well, because one of the big problems I find with games is, like, you know, it's either more stealthy or it's more action, and once you try to cross into the other, it just doesn't work that well. Like in a stealth game, if you trigger the action sequence when you're caught, it's often just garbage. So it's paramount you don't get caught. Whereas in this game, once you do, it still fundamentally works great. And it's to the point where I think it rewards both styles. You can go in more action-focused if you want. For me, I tried to be stealthy as long as I could until I couldn't anymore, where it turns into an action game. So yeah, thrilling stuff. It actually reminded me a lot of, in a stealth sense, like to Metal Gear Solid 3, where you could use the grass and the environment itself to hide in areas that you wouldn't normally think at first you could hide in, but you can just like cross it. You can cross an entire field, for instance, largely out of view, and that is great. The narrative is a part where I'm a little bit more mixed on, because I just beat it last night, and I literally just sat in front of the TV for like 30 minutes, just kind of processing what happened. And I'm still not fully sure how I feel, but usually that means that I kind of do know how I feel. I'm just cementing, like working my way through it. And that's a part again, we're gonna try to avoid spoilers here, but that's the part I'm a little bit more mixed on. It does some amazing things, I think. Some things I've never seen in a game before that I can recall. We've seen games touch on elements that they do here, but never to the extent they go to here. But I'm not fully sure if I'm fully on board with how it all wrapped up, or maybe more in how they chose to wrap it up. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, Steve. Sorry, I kind of rambled there, but yeah.
No, that's fine. This is a game that it's really easy to go at length about. So I want to tackle what you said in two parts, right? Because we're talking about mechanics and narrative.
Right.
And I agree with you completely on the mechanics. I think that they're really excellent. They feel a lot more refined than The Last of Us Part 1. And like you mentioned, there were parts of The Last of Us Part 1, while that is a great game, where it started to get kind of tedious. Like the boosting thing was overused to the point that they actually used it once to trick you, right? Because you just became so accustomed to that loop of like, oh, hey, we got to load in some new scenery, so we're going to have Joel boost Ellie. And in this game, that happens a lot less.
Right.
Boosting is definitely still there, but it's nowhere near as prevalent. And like you said, the pacing overall is a lot better. The pacing of the gameplay feels really good, to where there aren't moments that feel unintentionally slow.
Yeah.
Whereas I think The Last of Us Part 1 has a few of those moments where it kind of breaks up the pace and you feel like you've kind of hit a point you have to slog through. Right. I don't think there are any of those, or not many, in The Last of Us Part 2.
Yeah, I think overall the pacing is really solid. I don't know if it would fully hold up upon replay, just because I think without the suspense of what's going to happen, some parts may come across a little bit slower than they did initially. But on my first playthrough, yeah, I don't think there was really a point where I'm like, well, I wish this had finished sooner, or except with one key exception, perhaps, which does kind of involve spoilers, so we won't dive into it. But I think just to give a surface level non-spoiler take, I think the ending went on way longer than I expected, or I should say, like, the final part of the game went on way longer than I expected. Before that, though, fantastic pacing.
Yeah, I agree that you probably could have tidied up the ending a little bit, had it go a little bit faster. But at the same time, I feel like had it ended sooner, like had it been truncated and ended sooner, again, really hard to do this without going into spoilers,
Yeah.
but had it ended sooner, I feel like I would have been left kind of hanging
Mhm.
as to some story threads and how they conclude. So I kind of like that. In a sense, it ties it up all neatly at the end, which I enjoy. But I agree, you probably could have found a way to make the gameplay portion of that sequence take less time.
Yeah.
The narrative is obviously, I think, where we're going to disagree here. To me, it's a really incredible, very powerful narrative that I enjoyed a lot. I think that what happens with Ellie throughout the course of the game is really interesting to me, because I like games that play with my agency, that mess with how I feel about what's going on in the
Right.
game. I kind of like it when games put me in a situation where I'm doing something that I don't necessarily feel is the right thing, and it makes me question the motives of the character.
It's something games have attempted this before. Like, of course, there's a whole, morality type system we've seen in multiple games, which isn't quite the same thing you're talking about, but similar. Like, they try to make you feel about your actions in a way that you don't always. And I think it often comes across as artificial. It's like, okay, I'm gonna make this choice, I get like 10 bad guy points. Or make the good choice, I get 10 good guy points, And sometimes it doesn't even have any meaningful impact. Last of Us 2 does something, it does things I think, as I already said, that I hadn't expected the game to do in this way. And it's really powerful when it does it, like when it lands, it's really well done. To the point that it was making me do things I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
Which is very unique and different, and that's probably the part that's going to stand out the most. I think we're going to see a lot of pieces come out now that we can talk about spoilers. Again, we're trying to avoid that here, but we're going to see a lot of pieces discuss this, about how our actions as a player may not be in alignment with the player's action, or sorry, with the character's actions, what they want to do, or our agency, as you were touching on, is different from what our motives as a player is different from the character's motives, which is kind of really cool.
Yeah, I like that fact, because a lot of games try to align the player with the goals of the character. They want you to be on board with the character and what they're doing, to take it and break it down to most simplistic terms, right? If you're playing like Mario, it's very easy to understand why Mario wants to rescue the princess.
Yeah, we want the
princess. It's easy.
Right.
Yeah. Those are easy motivations to get on board with. It's, it's very surface level, simple stuff that is understandable. And I think The Last of Us Part 2, one of my favorite things that it does is initially it is really easy to get on board with Ellie's quest.
Right.
Ellie's out there, for revenge. And it's easy to understand that. Like, it's easy to understand that if you've been wronged, you want to get back.
Right.
You want to get back at whoever did this to you or did whatever to you. But then when you start to realize, like, oh God, like what does it take to do this?
What all that entails, exactly.
Yeah. When you start to realize what that entails and what it takes to get that revenge and to make Ellie whole again, you start to realize that maybe, just maybe, she should just let it go and learn and find a healthier way to cope with her feelings. But ultimately, this isn't that kind of game. This is you're more along for the ride with the story. Like you're technically in the driver's seat, but you really aren't.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things a lot of the discourse that I hear around this game is, oh, I hated it, 10 out of 10. But when you break it down further, it's not I hated the game. It's, I realized that I didn't like what the character was doing, but that's what makes it compelling.
That's exactly it. That might be part of where my hang-up is, or disconnect, if you want to call it that, is I understand what the game was doing, and I appreciate that it made me think. at the same time, I don't know, comparing to like Last of Us 1, where my feelings as a player were in alignment with the characters. I don't know if I like having that. It's almost like cognitive dissonance at times playing Last of Us 2, and I don't know if I like that. Again, I respect it, but comparing it directly to the first game, which again was my personal game of the decade or game of the year for 2013, based on our game of the decade discussions, I don't know if I like it as much, and I don't know if I'm as inclined to replay it either. I haven't replayed Last of Us either, I should say for the record, since my playthrough just a few months ago. That's why I haven't replayed it. But I think I would be more interested in re-seeing that story through than this story through. Even if this one might be the more interesting one to discuss, possibly, but I don't know, it's tough. They were both interesting in their own ways. However, again, you then have the gameplay portion, which I really did enjoy, and I think that part would make it difficult to go back to the original Last of Us, because for as well as that game held up to me just playing it through recently, it's going to be hard to going back to after playing Last of Us 2 with how meaningfully it evolved the gameplay that we thought, that we knew of the series.
Yeah, going back to the mechanics, I think that what The Last of Us Part 2 does so well is it evolves the mechanics that were laid out in the original in a way that kind of makes sense. Like when I haven't played The Last of Us Part 2 since I want to say 2014. Or I'm sorry, I haven't played the original The Last of Us since 2014. So it's been 6 years.
Right.
And that when I hopped into The Last of Us Part 2, I started playing it and everything felt natural. It felt as though I was playing, but I slowly started to realize like there's a lot that's different. It just feels like it isn't.
That's exactly it. Starting off, I for the first few hours, I'm like, this feels just like Last of Us. Like I'm like, is there even like I'm not seeing the meaningfully different gameplay, but it creeps in on you slowly, I find.
Yeah, they did a great job of slowly introducing new elements like the rope, and they. Ellie's jump button, and I know a lot of people are like, har, there's a jump button, big deal, but it does make a difference. It makes a difference in how you move. Ellie's dodge, like she's so fluid compared to how people move in the Last of Us Part 1. And it feels like it would be hard to go back to the combat and traversal mechanics of the original without feeling a bit hamstrung, because everything that's new in The Last of Us Part 2 feels like a natural extension of what was there in the first game.
Yeah, there's a freedom here that you didn't realize you were missing in the first game that going back to, I'm certain, would stand out after playing 2. I'm reminded just a little bit, it's not the perfect analogy, but I am reminded a little bit of like going from Resident Evil 3 to Resident Evil 4, where the fundamentals are mostly the same, but in that game's case, like the change of perspective really made it feel quite a bit different, and they played on that too. And I think that's kind of a little bit similar here. Obviously the perspective hasn't changed, but the way that the mechanics that they add on top of what you already knew do meaningfully change it as a whole, and in that sense I think it feels similar to RE4.
Yeah, I agree that, it is similar in that sense. I would almost liken it to playing like Skyward Sword versus Breath of the Wild in terms of just sheer like standard mechanics. Like, just because they added some things that seem really like surface level simple.
Right.
Like, Link can literally Link has a jump button in this one, and you've got the ability to climb things. Just to Link moves so much differently, even though it feels just similar enough to where if you've played a 3D Zelda, Breath of the Wild, you're right at home. Right. You don't need a tutorial, but it expands incrementally in a way that makes it feel completely different. So I guess that's it. We're gonna have to have an edit point here. Yeah. So for me, I guess the difference is I can understand. Going back to the narrative for a second, Joel's motivations, I think, are super simple to understand for a lot of people, especially, in the first one. Like for folks like you and me, we're both, guys in our 30s, and it's simple to understand like the idea of having someone in your life that's kind of like a daughter figure, and wanting to protect that person and the lengths you might go to make sure that person is safe.
Right.
And for Last of Us Part 2, that can be a little bit more difficult to ascertain. I think it is hard to pinpoint like a connection to a strong desire for revenge. Fortunately, most people haven't had to go through such a traumatic experience that they're out for blood, literally.
No, revenge these days is subtweeting some guy you mildly disagree with.
Yeah, that's true.
Yep.
So I guess my question for you, Andre, is, and again, it's really hard to discuss this because I think this is a very your opinion of this game is going to weigh heavily on how you connect with the narrative, how you feel about the story. Because I think the issue that most people are going to have with it isn't going to be a mechanical issue. The game controls really well.
Yeah, it does.
Gameplay is not something I didn't have a single point where I felt like, oh man, if they changed the design of this or moved this quest line, that the game would be better for it. I think as far as the mechanical elements of the game, it is very well executed.
It's sublime.
The sound design, the sound design is incredible. The world design is really great at kind of helping you pathfind without being super obvious about the fact that that's what they're doing, and giving you multiple ways in and out of objectives.
Yeah.
So you can get where you're going through a variety of ways. And I think Seattle in particular, the Seattle portion of the game is really well designed in the sense that it makes that kind of seem seamless, which is really difficult to do. But there is something unique to this conversation that I think would help from your perspective, because if you don't know, Andre is recording this video right now from Seattle.
That's right.
So Andre, how did you feel kind of walking around a post-apocalyptic version of the city you live in?
Dude, it was freaky because I started playing just after like the riots had finally subsided in Seattle from the police like gassing protesters. I'm like, geez, is this like a look at our immediate future? Like, it felt surreal going from this chaos happening in real life to what could have been the end result, what might still be the end result. You know what I'm saying? So it was a little bit weird to have that contrast there and see just how fitting it was, how disturbingly fitting it was, given the times we are going through right now. Especially, also the fact the whole game is based around a virus, which is also happening in real life at this point. So yeah, that whole thing is the whole connections are just kind of wild. The timing of this all. So yeah, and it was weird and fun to see Seattle represented in the game. I say fun, like, interesting, I should say, in this way, because there are landmarks in the game that I recognize. Obviously, things, obvious like the Space Needle, but there's also lesser ones too, like a train station, for instance. I'm trying to remember what else there is. There's a few other buildings in there you can pull from. The waterfront in general, especially the Ferris wheel. So yeah, that was all fun to see. It's not one-to-one at all, or even close. The broad strokes are somewhat accurate, but if you remove those landmarks, I don't think anyone would really know what city it was, aside from the rain and the abundant greenery, which was cool. So I mean, they did a good job. They did a pretty good job at capturing the feel of it, but yeah, it's not accurate on a street level, really. But anyways, yeah. So that's kind of how I felt about it.
So, kind of diving a little deeper into the story without, again, getting too far into spoilers, because like I said, I think that's where your opinion becomes a bit more nuanced and kind of branches off from my own, because I think we both agree that mechanically, world design wise, audio design wise, that The Last of Us Part 2 is really well put together.
It's a beautiful game too. Gorgeous.
Yeah, it's really hard to understate how good this game looks. Like if you're just strictly into graphics, you'd have a hard time finding a better looking game, especially on PS4, than The Last of Us Part 2.
It almost feels like a preview of like the next generation. It's like, how is a PS4 handling this? And then I hear the 90 decibel fan. I'm like, oh, that's how.
Yeah, it is worth noting that the PS4 kicks up really high gear when this game is running. I have I think you played on the base model, correct?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, so it's no different on the Pro. The Pro gets really loud while playing this game. I played most of the game with headphones, so I didn't notice it, but I would notice that whenever I went to shut down and I'd take my headphones off, I'm like, wow, that has been going the whole time, hasn't it?
I had to literally hide my PS4 in the adjacent room. It was so loud and so distracting beneath my TV. I ran it into my office, which is next to my living room, shut the door, ran all the cables underneath the door. I'm like, I can't deal with this. This is so loud. So I feel for anyone out there who has to deal with this noise, because it actually is distracting, so...
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, like I said, I recommended in our review that if you're gonna play the game, try to get a good pair of headphones, hook them into your controller or something, But yeah, the PS4 the PS4 in general can be a little bit noisy at times. I'm curious to see how or if they'll address that with the PS5. But I wouldn't have been surprised if The Last of Us Part 2 was announced as like a cross-gen
Yeah.
title. It just looks so good that I kind of expected it to be. So I was surprised when the PlayStation 5 event came and went and we didn't get like, hey, there's a port coming out. And maybe that'll still happen, but even if it came out on the PlayStation 5 looking the way it does on the PS4,
it wouldn't
still
stand
be
out at all.
suitably
Or rather,
impressed.
I mean that in a good way. It wouldn't look out of place.
Right, exactly. That Final Fantasy VII Remake, these are both games that really push the hardware and
Yeah.
look really incredible. I always love seeing what developers can do, especially first-party developers can do at the end of a console life cycle, once they've mastered the hardware. And really, Naughty Dog has shown that they've definitely come to grips with the PlayStation 4. So I'm really excited to see what they do on the PS5 in the coming years.
Yep.
But breaking it down further into the story, again, trying to stay as spoiler free as possible. I'm curious at what point, because you mentioned that you weren't sure. When did you start to have doubts about the narrative or how you felt about it? When did your opinion start to shift?
It's probably around the halfway point of the game, which is also the point that we weren't able to discuss in reviews. And we're going to try to avoid specifics in this discussion too. But I think it was right around there, if not before and after, if that makes sense. I think I was feeling that way a little bit before, and then after is when I definitely started feeling more that way. So
what would you say, I think when we're talking about the halfway point, I think we're both referring to a very specific event. What would you say, how did your opinion change between that? Like, where were you at before and where did you end up?
Oh my god, this is hard. This is getting harder to talk about without spoilers. I think that's where I started to realize that my feelings as a player were diverging from what the characters wanted, which this is really hard to describe. But yeah, I think that's when I started to recognize what they were going for with the game, and I appreciate it. It just I didn't find it as, while it arguably might be more interesting than what they were doing with the first game, I didn't find it as... I wasn't able to empathize as much with this direction, and that created a disconnect for me with the characters, and I didn't enjoy playing through with them as much as I was the first game, or even up to that point. And I think that's where things start to diverge. And again, I understand they had to do it for the story they want, for the narrative they were trying to tell. It's just that, yeah, on a fundamental level, it didn't click with me as much as it had before.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense. It's, everybody's going to view these things differently. And I think that's what I find so interesting about this game is first off, I mean, in any game, there's no right or wrong take, right? There's no right way to view a game or wrong way to view a game. But it's interesting for me because initially I felt the same way you did. When we reached that point in the story, which again, we can't really go further into detail on, I initially felt very negative toward it. I was thinking like, oh, this is just, for lack of a better term, a filler episode. And I just want to get through this and get back to the event at hand, because you're left on kind of a cliffhanger. You're left like wondering what the fate of everyone is. And then they kind of take you back to this other half of the game, the second half, and you play through the whole second half not knowing what happened. So there's kind of this albatross around your neck of like, I want to know what's going to happen next, not what's going on here on my screen. But the more so for me, the more that section of the game wore on, the more positive I became on it, because I started to learn more about what was happening outside of my narrow view up to that point.
Right.
And that for me kind of gave me a wider perspective. It let me understand things from a different point of view. And that kind of made me less certain of the outcome that I wanted. Because up to that point, I was very clear in what I felt should happen.
Right.
And then when we return from that, playing through that second half, I was much more conflicted. It had burrowed into me and made me think maybe this outcome is not what I want. Maybe I want things to play out differently.
Right.
Maybe maybe Ellie isn't as good a person as I've been telling myself she is. And to me, that was interesting because I don't think I've really had a game. Well, you know what? Just to plug another thing we're doing, we were just recording Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door for Game Club, and I was talking about how much I love it when games subvert my expectations, how they make me uh, how they kind of mess with the idea of what I think I should be doing and taking me in a different direction with it. And I think The Last of Us Part 2, not that it's anything like The Thousand Year Door, but The Last of Us Part 2 does a really great job of making me think I want something and then showing me something else and that becoming the thing I want.
Yeah. I think at the point where, you know, around the halfway point, I think it's such a drastic shift in maybe tone, I should say, or I don't know what the best word is. But it took some time for it to gain traction for me. So there's that initial like period where I wasn't quite invested in what was happening. But then, you know, then that does pick up and I started becoming more invested in it. But then when you reach its natural conclusion, that's where I started to have issues again. Again, not necessarily with anything that happens with the characters inherently. It's, well, actually, no, I take that back. I mean, I think that is part of it. I think part of it is that the characters aren't as likable, maybe, which I really, like, in the original game, I really enjoyed Ellie and Joel, and their relationship and how that grew, and it's very different this time. There are moments that remind me of some of the chemistry of that game, but we never have anything on quite the scale that game had, with quite the development, and at a level that I liked happening, that I respected of the characters. Whereas this time, yeah, it diverged quite a bit from characters that I enjoy watching, I suppose. And the weird thing is, like, I don't mind. Yeah, again, I'm trying to avoid spoilers here.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's a difficult game not to spoil.
Right. Yeah, so I guess I about summed it up. So yeah, I think it's more that I was less on board with all the characters' actions this time at points, and that just inherently made it so I connected with them less, and as such, I kind of enjoyed it less as a consequence.
That makes sense. You touched on something, though, that I want to go back to and discuss, because there are some really heartwarming moments in this game. I think I'm curious how you feel about the portrayal of the relationship between Joel and Ellie in this game. Well, let me hear your thoughts before I say anything.
Man, you're really testing our ability here. I didn't love it, actually.
Really?
Yeah, didn't love it, and I can't get into why. There were parts that were well done, I think, but again, I never felt I feel like where this game heads is not quite where I pictured from the end of the first game. And I think that applies to the narrative in general. Which again, I respect on the level that they didn't just repeat or just extend what was happening already. They do something new here. But it also made it that I didn't like it as much. So...
Interesting. So there's kind of... if you've been watching the channel for a long time, or specifically a lot of my content, you probably know that I have kids. And there's a fear that I have that as my kids grow older, that I'll grow further apart from them. Because right now they're little. And, you know, honestly, I have a daughter that's nearly the age that Ellie was in The Last of Us Part 1. And I kind of have this thing in the back of my mind where I think about, as she grows older, like, am I going to be able to maintain the close relationship I have with her now? Or is she going to become more independent and, you know, I'm not cool? Like, she's going to be like, you know, back off, Dad. Like, get out of my face. And the way I read the ending of The Last of Us Part 1 is that there was this well, not that there was a secret, because that's outright called out. Like, Joel has lied to Ellie, and we as the player know that. And she asks him if he's lying. And he says no. He says he's telling the truth about what happened. And so I had this sense of foreboding about it. Like, this was eventually going to come out if this story ever continued. And without going into spoilers for The Last of Us Part 2, there are moments where you feel there's kind of like a tension between Joel and Ellie. Like, things aren't okay. But as a foil to that, there are also these really cute, kind of heartwarming moments where Joel kind of plays like the goofy, awkward dad to like a young adult, like trying to, you know, mend bonds with her, like trying to mend fences with her. And I really liked those moments just because it kind of, again, I have this fear of, my kids growing up and growing away from me. And it's nice to see, like, him have this desire. I could really identify with him in those moments. And I thought that those moments were cute. Like there's particularly, one of my favorite scenes in The Last of Us Part 1 is the giraffe scene.
Yeah, it's great.
It's one of the greatest moments, in my opinion, between Joel and Ellie. And I think if I say it this way, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But I feel like there is a moment between Joel and Ellie in The Last of Us Part 2 that rivals that scene in terms of how cute it is.
I'm actually not sure if I immediately know what you mean.
All right, let me try to phrase it in a way that makes sense without spoiling it. There's a moment where Joel goes very far out of his way to make Ellie smile during the game.
Oh, yeah, okay, I know what you mean now. Yeah.
Yeah, so to me anyway, that was like The Last of Us Part 2's giraffe scene.
Right.
It was, and for me, that moment was a pretty good emotional payoff, especially considering what's happening in the narrative around that moment.
Yeah.
In that it just kind of reminds you that there's this, why Ellie's motivation is as strong as it is going into this kind of really messed up, quest.
Right. Yeah, you kind of touched on something there. I think maybe that's part of the reason for my maybe disconnect again, is because there's a time skip between Last of Us and Last of Us 2, a pretty sizable one. And so we miss
4 years.
Yeah, so we miss a lot of the parts I think I wanted to see, like that they're further bonding. So when we pick up in Last of Us 2, the characters aren't where we left them at. And we get glimpses of that, as you're saying, through the flash. I guess there are, flashbacks. Hope that's not a spoiler. And I don't know if those were enough for me to reconcile where we're at now. And also, as part of that, just in the gameplay sense, I found those a little bit confusing at times. Maybe it's just me. But with the constant shifts, I suppose, I sometimes even forgot what time frame I was in. I mean, I could figure it out, but like I had to think for a moment, like, oh right, I'm back here doing this because of this. Did you ever have any of that at all, or?
I never got confused because I think they did a really good job signposting like you're in a different point in time.
Yeah.
I mean, for one, they actually like tell you how long ago it was in the context of the game. So when you do a flashback, you'll get like, oh, this was 4 years ago. It'll say 4 years ago in huge letters. And then yeah, you can play through a pretty sizable chunk of that. But I think one of the things that really helps is that Ellie is visibly younger. Like her character model is different. You're not playing as like 19-year-old grizzled Ellie in these flashbacks. So they kind of, if you're playing from 4 years ago, you're playing as the model of Ellie from The Last of Us Part 1.
Yeah,
so
I'm thinking,
she's shorter.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking of a slightly broader perspective, if that makes sense. I'm not thinking of just the specific sequences you're thinking of.
Yeah, I don't know. I never felt. I think it's more difficult in certain scenarios for sure to tell like, oh hey, this is, and I think that it doesn't necessarily always work on the same level it does. I think not all flashbacks in this game are of equal importance or impact, and I think that's why some of them are noticeably shorter. Like some of the flashbacks that involve Ellie and Joel are way longer, right? And I think that there's good reason to that, because they usually like it's hard to overstate the violence in this game. It's hard to overstate like how graphic and kind of disturbing it can be at times.
Yeah, largely partially because of your own actions, even during combat. There was like during my first encounter, like one of the earlier encounters, or when the first like earlier. It's not that early, but when the earlier like major encounters with humans, I was using explosives, and I'm like, dang! Like you see the results, the aftermath of those. Like, oh man, this is brutal.
Oh yeah, I had I had attacked someone with like a blunt object, and this game has a photo mode, right? And so I got curious, and I think I had smashed him with like a crowbar or something, and I zoomed in on the body on the floor, and it was Oh man, I wish I hadn't done that. Like just to give you an idea, like the person's eye was like
Oh my
popped out of their
god.
head, but the other one was still
Yeah.
in, and it was just really rough. But that's not even the worst of it. Like, um, I used a rifle and I shot someone like in the arm, and their arm just comes off.
Yeah.
And it's not just like, I mean, that's been a thing in games for a long time. Like in the PS2, you can shoot someone's arm off in GTA 3,
Right.
right? But they scream, and it's like this
Yeah.
blood curdling yell, like,
Yeah, the characters
and
will like yell for each other, or even like they use each other's names in this game.
yeah, they'll be like, Frank's been
Right,
shot, and
yeah.
it is messed up. Like it kind of gets to you on a certain level. And so I think these flashbacks are kind of helpful because you're not completely like constantly immersed in just blood and gore, and some of these flashbacks, and there is combat and there is killing in the flashbacks. Like it still plays like the rest of the game, but it's not quite as
Yeah, they're a
brutal.
bit of intermissions almost, like a bit of a
Yeah,
palate
it's like
cleanser.
Yeah, it's like, we know you just killed 38 guys. Like we'll give you kind of a slower paced
Right.
interlude in between these to kind of catch your breath a little, because and there are moments in this game where I'm in the middle of combat, I'm in the thick of it, and I find myself literally just holding my breath, like, please get through
Oh,
this. Like I want this encounter.
there are so many times that like yeah, I'm freaking out in real life. Yeah, I don't even know how to describe it. Like I'm like losing it playing this game. It's so intense, and I'm like just like a nervous wreck trying to either like stay outside or escape, or there were any number of situations where like I was very deeply concerned for what was happening, and that's I don't think I've felt that way in a game, if ever, like to that extent, that often. Like the combat here is so visceral and the enemy is so realistic. Like the AI is doing fantastic stuff here, and it all like just kind of works together to build a greater whole that actually does help support the narrative they're trying to tell here. If not in a extremely obvious way, but it does definitely help support some of the themes they're exploring. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I like that you mentioned the AI, because I feel like it has been dramatically improved from The Last of Us Part
oh
One.
yeah,
Like, if you haven't watched our Game of the Decade discussion for 2013, please go do that. It's great. And The Last of Us ended up winning that year from our voting, which I didn't think would happen, but we were discussing it, and one of the points I brought up against The Last of Us Part 1 was that I was able to just hole up like in a room and just stab people over and over again.
not this
And it
time.
was just brain dead simple for me to get through groups. In this game, that does not fly
No.
at all. Like, especially once they introduce the dogs who can also literally sniff you out. So now you have to use listen mode to keep track of your scent trail, as well as, just worry about humans flanking you on either side, coming around from different approaches. They communicate to each other when they know you're reloading, stuff like
Right.
that. It's just, it's stressful, and you feel like you constantly have to be on the run. Like you have to run and hide, pick off a guy, run to a new spot. Like it is some of the most like heart racing kind of stuff that I've ever experienced. Like I remember in one specific portion where there was 3 dogs and several people, and I made the mistake of tipping them off. Like I ended up just Molotoving a person and a dog, and I thought like, oh, it'll be fine. It was not fine. Like I ended up, they alerted everyone. So and then everyone's coming after me. They all know where I'm at. The dogs are chasing me down, and I'm having to run, like jump through windows of buildings, hide behind bookshelves, like take a shot here, take a shot there. By the end of it, like I felt like I was just ready to collapse.
Right.
Like I was just like, okay, I finally got through it. I'm gonna pause this game and go downstairs and get a glass of water. I need I need to take a break.
Yeah.
And that's a testament to like how good the AI is in this game, because most games I'll just sit there and pick people off like no big deal. But they really do a good job of giving you this sense of anxiety.
Yeah, that's it. Near constant anxiety. I mean, I could name any number of examples, but one that does stand out is one of the probably first like big human encounters you have in the game, where I think it's your first encounter explosives, is the one I touched on earlier. You're kind of sneaking through, like you start off sneaking through like a village, and it culminates in a again, I don't get too specific here. A bit of a car sequence, I'll say. You know what part I'm talking about now?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that part just felt like it went. That whole sequence felt like it never ended. Like I kept thinking, has to be it. Like I have to be in the clear. I'm not, and that's just kept ratcheting up my fear level and the tension and anxiety and everything. And when it finally did end, I felt like the biggest sense of relief. I'm like, Jesus, God, my heart cannot take this. And yeah, that's something, that's a sensation that comes back throughout the game. Like every encounter feels like really impactful, and I love how there isn't always like, there's not always an obvious solution or obvious out. There are ways to like get through these areas, but and I think replaying the game now would probably be much easier than the first time through. The first time through, I was on the edge of my seat most of the entire way through, because you're trying to figure this out in real time, how to tackle these enemies. And yeah, these combat encounters are really something special. When you're not fully aware of what's happening, you don't fully know the landscape, and you're trying to it's a bit puzzle solving as you're trying to figure out a strategy to go through this area, and whether, what kind of tactics you're using, whether to try to sneak through entirely stealthily, try to sneak attack on some enemies, try to, just go all in Rambo style, which doesn't usually work out too well in your favor. It might,
No.
but not in my favor at least. But yeah, the combat in this game is probably some of the best I've experienced in a third person, or really any game, I should say. It's just so well done. And again, that largely comes down to the AI, where they do a great job of for one, feeling believable. Like it feels like these are actual characters, and working together. So you have to think on your feet, and yeah, you really have to be very careful with how you maneuver through here. I'm sure there are loopholes that I haven't discovered yet, but I'm glad I didn't, because not knowing what fully they were capable of definitely made it even more intense. And that only continues as you encounter a different group of characters later in the game, which I guess we can talk about them. They were in the E3 trailer. The Scars. They are terrifying, dear God. And the way they whistle to each other, just the sound design and everything works so well, especially by the point you encounter them. This is where they really ramp up the ability to use the environment to kind of sneak your way through, and it's so nerve-wracking to kind of creep up on the guy in the grass and pray they don't see you, or if you're trying to just hide from them as you're walking past, as you're trying to get into their base or something. So
yeah, and the thing I like is that stealth kills don't automatically make you invisible or invincible. You can get noticed doing a stealth kill.
Yeah, they're nerve-wracking.
And yeah, it's scary. Stealth kills, if you get noticed, you're toast. So you do have to consider what other enemies are around, and a lot of games still, for some reason, in 2020 don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I really, really like the fact that you have to consider that these guys aren't just brain dead. They're gonna notice you if you're within a reasonable distance, right? And so you have to consider everything when you're taking enemies out. One of the things I love that you can do is you can go prone in this game.
Yeah, that's great.
And you can get a bow and arrow, so you can actually take enemies out while hiding in the grass, which ended up being insanely useful. The Scars, or the Seraphites, depending on your leaning towards them, and they're called Scars because they literally have Heath Ledger Joker style scars on their face. Yeah, so that already gives you an idea of how hardcore these people are, that they kind of willingly do this to themselves. But yeah, they're a scary group. They feel intimidating in a way that the WLF does not. And it's interesting to kind of be in between a war between these two factions. Like the WLF, there's a lot of instances in the game where you step right into the thick of a battle that you're not part of.
Right.
You just walk in and there's people on both sides smoking each other, and you can choose to just hang out and let it play out and pick off survivors, or sneak past the whole thing. Because in general, these guys, they're not going to ignore the person shooting them because the player walked through.
Right.
If they're in the middle of being shot at by someone else, they're going to ignore you.
Yeah.
They don't care. And I use that to my advantage several times. I'd be like, I don't want any part of this. I'm running right on through. But that being said, let's get off of human opponents for a second, because we've talked a lot about the humans in this game, but we really haven't touched on the infected too much.
No.
So I'm, and rightfully so in a sense, because this game features the infected a whole lot less, in my opinion, than The Last of Us Part 1 did, and that makes sense because we're dealing with a world in which people have kind of become used to the fact that these cordyceps exist, and people, they know how to take care of themselves so they don't get infected, and they also kind of know what types there are out there now. So I was curious, how did you feel about the infected in this game versus The Last of Us Part 1?
That's a good one. Yeah, they do feel a little bit comparatively understated in this game. I think the humans are probably the overall more intense encounters, but I still think when it comes to sheer fear, at least initially, I think the infected still probably take it. Like every time I had to put on a mask or go into a dark area, use my flashlight, I'm like, oh no, I really don't want to do this, And then once I got through it, I'm like, okay, it wasn't that bad. But yeah, those are definitely creepy moments. So yeah, the infected are probably not. Yeah, they're a little bit easier to deal with, I think, than the humans. They're a little bit simpler. They're AI, I mean, by design, they're not as smart as the humans are. But yeah, they're still. It definitely feels different. So it definitely mixes up the gameplay, and that's what's fun about this game is. Different groups of enemies between not just the infected humans, but even the humans themselves, and different types of infected, they all feel very different. And there's definitely still some standout moments with the infected. I mean, quite a few even that definitely left me catching my breath afterward. I'm like, whoa.
Oh yeah.
There are parts. I mean, actually, the parts I freaked out the most during, like the absolute peaks, even if it was less often than with the humans, the absolute peaks still involved the infected. I'm like, oh my god, jeez. How did I?
Oh yeah,
that?
yeah. There are a couple moments I can think of where it was just like, oh no, like I don't want any part of this. Like, is there a way I can skip this? But yeah, it was interesting to me too, because I agree with you that they don't have the focus that they did. But when it comes to like the highs of the game in terms of just ratcheting up your fear and anxiety, nothing does it quite like the infected.
Especially some of the new types.
Like you said, the darkness, the kind of creepiness of the environments you find yourself in, where you're mostly up against them, is second to none.
Yeah.
I really. I enjoy how much they make me not want to do that. Like how much they make me be like, oh no, like, they impart this sense of just like, oh, whatever's behind this door is bad for you.
Right. Yeah.
And it always is. So I really, really think that while they didn't put the spotlight on them as much as they did, which again, in the context of the universe of this game makes sense. They did a really great job of that handful of encounters feeling really unnerving.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we've covered a lot of what we can without going deep into the story of this game, which I feel like maybe at some point we should, like for our patrons or on for our behind the scenes folks. But we will have a discussion on the channel. Like I said, between myself, Kat Bailey from US Gamer, and Greg Miller of Kind of Funny, where we will go really deep into the story. Look for that on Sunday, I think.
Yeah, pretty soon.
Yeah, so pretty soon on the channel we'll have a spoiler cast where we go deep into all the aspects of the story of the game. But for now, do you have any other thoughts? What are your parting thoughts on The Last of Us Part 2?
It's really good. It's really good. I'm still processing my thoughts on the narrative, and it might take another playthrough, but I don't know if I want to do that to fully cement my feel. Like, I actually went back and started a new file last night just to kind of like see how far I'd come. And it's interesting in how circular it almost felt, and how things that didn't fully make sense then make sense now, and that was kind of interesting. So I think a playthrough might possibly be more, if not, yeah, actually it might possibly be more rewarding, if not as rewarding in a different way as my first playthrough. But yeah, at least in a gameplay sense though, I think this game is going to be hard to top for a third-person shooter or action, whatever you want to call it, stealth shooter, stealth action game. Fantastic stuff, really sublime. Naughty Dog nailed it. I think it's definitely their best gameplay-based game. It's only the narrative where I start to have, where things don't quite mash for me, quite work for me in the same way that it seems it has for a lot of reviewers. And I think that's also, and that stands out because that is what elevated Last of Us 1. It was a narrative that really took what was solid gameplay and took it to the next level. Whereas this time, they are doing some entirely new stuff here, I think, that I hugely respect. In the end, I don't think I enjoyed the narrative as much as the first one did. In that sense, I am a little bit let down by that. So yeah, I'm very conflicted on this. I'm going to need some more time, I think, to fully figure out how I feel on the game in general.
All right.
Yeah.
Are you ready for the tough
Oh
question?
no, is it? I think I know what's coming.
If
Oh no, maybe
if
not.
you were to
Yep.
if you were to rate this game today, what would you rate it?
I hate you, Steve.
We can't do a second opinion
I
video
know it's
without a
true.
rating at the end.
Well, right now where I'm at, it would this is tough. It would probably be liked a lot with a possibility for love. It's something I would have had to, would have had more time to think about for a proper review. But I think right now I would go like a lot, again, with a possibility for that I could have gone love. But I'm probably more leaning toward liked a lot at this point, so.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so, any final thoughts?
I think that's about it. I mean, I think no matter what, you have to play this game. At the least, too. I mean, for one, the gameplay alone is fantastic. And two, just to see what Naughty Dog is going for here. Because even if, I mean, whether or not I liked it as much as some others did, it's interesting to discuss on its own level for that reason. And just see what people, see what yourself thought and compare it to others. And I think it'll be fun to discuss this even more in depth with you, Steve, when we can, when we're not afraid to spoil things. I think we did a pretty good job stepping around as much as possible in this one. But yeah, it would be fun to do an even more in-depth discussion, whether officially as on the channel or not at some point. So.
Yeah, agreed. Well, that about wraps it up for our spoiler-free second opinion discussion on The Last of Us Part 2. As always, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe to Game Explained for much more on The Last of Us Part 2 and all other things gaming as well. Ring that notification bell to be the first to know every time a new video goes up, and I'll see you next time. Bye.